Thank you. Thanks, Felicia. I didn't know before today that Felicia was introducing me. That's really special because she is a particularly special friend. She's the godmother to my presence in this county because, as she told you, she was in charge of the fellowship that brought me in here supposedly for 2 weeks, a 2-week visit to Emory and Henry, which turned into a lifetime visit to Washington County. And in fact, yes, I gave a lecture among many things that they had me do when I was a visiting writer. I gave a lecture to a class run by this Dr. Stephen Hopp, who, I guess I gave such a good lecture that he had to marry me. So there we are. But the other thing that I will tell you about Felicia is she was the first person outside of my household to read Unsheltered. The first readers of my books are always Stephen, my husband, and Judy, my friend and assistant. They read everything right as soon as it comes off of the printer in the first draft. But after I had a first draft, the first person to read it was Felicia, so that was very important to me to hear what she thought of it, and then of course it gets rewritten 100 more times, but that's all part of the process. So I want to tell you how happy I am to be in a building I've been in before, and that I'm not going to sleep in a hotel bed tonight. In modern times, they send you on a book tour, and it's not the easiest part of my job for me. I like most writers, I think that I was drawn to my job because I love being in a room by myself, for many hours every day. Writers have to be comfortable with our own company, and very happy to spend all day with our imaginary friends, and then we can go make dinner, but not with our imaginary friends. We leave them upstairs. But, in modern times, they want you to promote, and so I shouldn't have counted. I've been on 24 airplanes, probably some of them were the same one, but 24 separate flights in the last 6 weeks to many different cities. I don't have the time to even know where I am, but that's all over, and there's no place like home, so it's wonderful to be back here in front of the hometown crowd. I think the hardest thing for me about book tour is that it's as a good Appalachian girl, a person who grew up in this culture, one of the important values which I respect in our culture is modesty. You know what I'm talking about, right? We don't talk about ourselves a lot, and we don't get above our raisins, as they say. And in my childhood, one of the things that people said, especially about women, that really stuck in my ear, I would hear people say, "She is parading herself around." Right? Well, that is what I have been doing. And so I have to make bargains with myself to feel all right about it. And the bargain that I have made over and over again is that this is not about me. And it is not about any one book, not my book or any other book. It is about reading and books and literature and the value of those things to our culture, and especially to our country and our nation and our people at this moment. There you are. I share your applause with you, because there is really something, and I'll say there's been something really wonderful about being every night in a room in a different city, in a big room full of people who have come together as a community because of their love of books. And tonight you've done that specifically for the library. So thank you for your support of the library, which is the beating heart of any and every community. Thanks for continuing to support it. Don't forget to use it. I'm very proud to be raising a new generation of library lovers. My 2-year-old grandson goes to story time every Monday, and he loves it more than anything. So thank you for using your library. And thank you for reading. So I think I am supposed to parade myself around a little bit and talk to you about this new book. So I'm going to do that. I'll tell you just the barest minimum maybe about why I wrote it, how I wrote it. I'll read to you a little bit from it if you want me to. But the main thing I want to do is just open the floor to questions and talk about whatever you would like to talk about. Okay, sound like a plan? Okay, good. About 5 years ago, when I finished one book, you know, I have to start another one. That's how it works. And I always begin by looking around at the world and thinking about what it is that's troubling me most. What are the big questions that need to be answered? Because I feel like that's a good starting point for any artist and for a novelist. And I want to take on big questions, you know, things that seem worth my time, because I'm going to be in there, you know, just wrestling with it for years, and then ultimately that are worth your time too, that's worth your while. I don't just want to entertain you, I want to just engage you with something bigger than any of us. So what occurred to me 4 and 5 years ago was that it seemed like we were looking at the end of the world as we know it. So many kinds of our familiar shelter were failing us at every level: economic, social, political, environmental. And this was 5 years ago, mind you. I had no idea what was coming. But already it just seemed so clear that the basic things that we had always counted on just weren't going to be there. A job at the end of a college degree, a pension at the end of a long career of work, health care when you need it, even things more basic than that the ice on the North Pole would stay frozen, that there would always be more fish in the sea. There won't, you know, and so I thought, this is a special time we're living in, when many things that many truths we hold to be self-evident are turning out to be untrue. How interesting it would be to write about, not specifically, you know, the politics of that, but the human behavior of that. What is it that we do? What do people do? How do we behave? What do we turn to when we feel, in these times when we feel that all the rules that we learned aren't working anymore? Are we open to new rules, or do we just keep trying to apply the old ones again and again? When it seems like we're running sort of short of everything in the world, when everything is in short supply, what do? We say, I know, growth and consumption, that'll fix this, right? We just keep trying to do what worked, 50 years ago. What is it about us that wants to do that? That's the territory of a writer, to sort of explore the human psyche and kind of what makes us do what we do. Okay, that would be interesting, I thought. However, when you write about the foolishness of the times that we're in and how we're acting, people don't necessarily like that very much. So as an artist, you have to be a little bit tricky. So I thought,
how much more enjoyable it is to look back at the past, at previous times when things were changing rapidly and people just refused to believe, that the world is round instead of flat. Refused to believe the earth travels around the sun. We like to look back and say, oh, how stupid they were. Connect the dots. So I decided to set up a novel that's about right now, the times we're in, and an earlier time, the 1870s, which was also a time in the United States of enormous crisis, enormous change. We had just been through a civil war, so the country was terribly polarized, every bit as badly as now, even worse. We had split into two countries, spent 5 years killing each other, and then that war ended by truce, but much like now, we had to behave as one country, but hearts were not in it. We felt like two different countries. And we're divided along very similar lines to right now, geographically and economically. So I thought that's interesting to compare that time to right now. And on top of it, into the world of 1875 came two books written by Charles Darwin that just kind of knocked people's socks off, not in a good way. Charles Darwin suggested, for the first time, nobody had ever imagined this before, for the first time he suggested that maybe the world wasn't put here for humans to use. Maybe we're not separate from this world and in charge of it all. Maybe the same natural forces, the same laws of gravity and physics and natural selection that created all of the rest of the world created us too. What if, instead of being above the world, we are part of the world, made of the same stuff? People did not want to hear it. They were so upset by that. I mean, poor Darwin. Thank goodness there was no internet. People hung him in effigy. They were very, very threatened by this. So it was a very uncertain time when it seemed like all the rules that people trusted were kind of going out the window. And what did they do? They held on tightly to the world, that they had. They wanted to make America great again, by burning Darwin in effigy. So I set up this novel in two different centuries. There's one set of characters who are living right now, and another living in 1875, and they're living in the same place. Seems like they're living in the same house, and of course, it's falling down, right? Because this is a novel. So that's the setup. And in the novel, you slide back and forth in time. Every other chapter, you're in one century or you're in the other. But pretty soon, you'll figure out that really you're reading one story. It all kind of clicks together. So that's how I set it up. And we could just go to questions right now, or I could read to you a little bit. I never think people want me to read.
I'm going to read to you. There's a glass of water here. And then I will do that. I'll just read two pretty short little sections, one from each set of characters to give you an introduction. I should have asked, are you hearing okay? Everybody hearing okay in the back? Raise your hand if you cannot hear me. Okay. Frida Kahlo just fell out of my book. That's funny. I don't know how she got in there. All right, so this is these are modern times. And also, I'm going to tell you that I read this book in real time, starting in the summer of 2015 to 2016, what was happening on the political scene. Okay, that's when this book takes place in the modern era of the book. And so when I began, there was this peculiar thing happening on the political horizon, a kind of leadership that was hardly even recognizable. I mean, very different from any kind of leadership we've known before. And I was thinking at the time, this is remarkable. Is this sustainable? I mean, none of it. Whether people loved him or hated him, nobody understood how this could keep going, because every week it seemed like something happened that in normal times would end a career, but it didn't. And so as I was writing about this as it was happening, and thinking, probably when this book comes out, nobody will even remember. Okay.
Looking into the future a little more carefully than I knew. So I'm going to just read you about this family that lives in this falling down house. Willa is middle-aged. She's in her mid-50s. This is one of those families that sort of has nothing they can count on. She was a journalist. She had a great job at a magazine as an editor, and her magazine folded. Her husband is an academic. He chased the tenure track. He finally got tenure, and his college closed. They have 2 kids in their 20s who are struggling with terrible college debts and the difficulty of finding employment. The one younger daughter, Tig, she's just completely oppositional. She's one of those kids you would say, like what my mother used to say about me, if you threw her in the river, she would float upstream. That's the younger daughter, Tig. So she's just trouble. And then they have Willa's father-in-law, who is, she describes him as he's elderly, he's not well, he's grumpy, she says he's a Titanic of pre-existing conditions, and they can't get him covered with Medicare, and also for reasons I won't explain, a baby has also landed in this household, so she's got a lot of worries. So here she is, she's trying to write, or she's trying to be a freelance writer, and she's in this office trying to write, but she's looking out the window and has noticed her daughter, Tig, the oppositional one, is under a car in the neighbor's yard with the neighbor, so she doesn't know what they're doing under there, a lube job or something. Okay, Willa turned to the pile of bills burgeoning like fungus on her desk. The moving in, utility double jeopardy, the harrowing new family-size insurance policy, the pediatric visit they'd had to schedule before the new policy kicked in. Some of these bills could wait till Yano's paycheck went into the bank, some could not. Property taxes were low here, especially on a house with a terminal diagnosis, but it was hard to call that good news. The roof repair wasn't even in the mix yet. For the 1,000th time in a year, she made an unthinking movement toward her phone to call her mother, the dead one. Willa believed in no ethereal realm, but still put her face on her desk, thought of her mother, and asked quietly, "What's going to happen to us?" Nothing presented. One underemployed breadwinner, 5 dependents. Yana was making what adjuncts made, barely $25,000, and given the state of academia, probably looking toward nothing better ahead. Willa recorded her freelance income in an Excel file, but was too embarrassed to hit the sigma function and learn her year-to-date total. In her college days, she'd waitressed. Theoretically, she could follow Tig's lead into one of the restaurants on Landis where she'd seen help wanted signs. But 2 minimum wages weren't noticeably better than 1. She'd probably written lines like that in her better-paid journalist days, believing herself savvy to working-class woes. In some sheltered life she could barely see from this one. Ticking down the list, her father-in-law was a liability, not an asset. Stunningly, her Harvard-educated son fell in the same category. It made no sense, but there it was. ZK
had mind-blowing debts and an infant in his care. If forced to leave this rent-free house, they would disperse to various refuges she could not make herself think about. And yet, how were they not just a normal family? When she got up and looked out the window again, Tig and friends had migrated from the car graveyard over to the deep shade between their two giant trees that flanked the view from the kitchen window and elbowed the gutters on their reach for the sky. Willa rested her forehead on the glass for a better look at things down there. In exaggerated slow motion, the three of them were moving through some kind of Tai Chi exercise. Tig led, circling an arm back, lifting a crane-like leg. The boys replicated her every move. "What is it, Willa? Bird watching?" Willa jumped, feeling Yano's hands around her waist. "Something like that." She rolled her head back against his chest, blushing. When the kids were little, she'd sometimes spied on them and their friends for the normal sentimental reasons, and even then she hated getting caught. Yano had no such reservations. Greek parenting seemed to involve walking into a kid's life and doing whatever, crashing the tea party, superintending the love life, doing the homework instead of tediously coaching it, and expecting gratitude for the all of it. Willa could feel the shift in his body when he spotted Tig down there below with the two fellows. He sighed quietly. Ella Antigonakimo, what is she doing? Despite his red-blooded American life, Yano sustained a charming first-generation exoticism. Maybe deliberately, though Willa thought not. He'd grown up speaking Greek at home, among sisters and cousins named after gods. "I think it's Tai Chi," she offered. "No, I know, with those boys. Those boys, those clothes, that hairdo. She looks like a Charlie Chaplin movie." "The Little Tramp, did he mean?" "No, probably one of the homeless waifs with the dark circles under the eyes." Yano took Tig's tiny stature as a permanent rebuke. He shared his family's view that all children should eat more, period. Yano folded his arms across Willa's waist and settled his chin on the top of her head, enclosing her like an envelope. His beard bristled deliciously against her scalp. They could stand all day like this. Maybe should have tried that in lieu of procreation. I'm going to slip back into an earlier century, 150 years earlier, in the same town, in the same place. And there we have some real people, some actual historical figures who I decided to bring into my novel. And in fact, they brought me to the choice of setting this novel in a place called Vineland, New Jersey. I knew that I wanted characters who, for that time period, I wanted some characters who actually had a stake in the Darwinian debate. And I studied I read about various, I thought about putting Darwin himself in the book. He's a really interesting person, but then I decided to leave him alone. He's had enough hate mail. And I wanted to set it, on this side of the Atlantic. I'm an American novelist. I write American novels, it seems. So I was looking at Americans who, in the 19th century, had championed Darwin's ideas. I started with Asa Gray, who was a very well-known botanist. He just didn't do it for me. I read a lot about him. It was like one of those dates, it looks good on paper. Chemistry just wasn't there. Just swipe left. Instead, I read about some of his colleagues, and I ran across a name I had never heard before, Mary Treat. I could find out almost nothing about her online except that she She was a lady naturalist, as they were called in the 19th century. She left a considerable body of writing. She wrote books and many, many articles for the scientific and popular press about botany, entomology, natural history in general. But I couldn't find anything about her personally, except that she had lived in a place called Vineland, New Jersey. So we called, Judy called, there was a historical society there to find out whether they had any information about Mary Treat. And the answer was sort of like, I've been waiting all my life. She said, this wonderful woman named Patricia Martinelli, who was the curator of this little historical society, said, come on down. So I got on a plane and I flew to Vineland, New Jersey, and wow, there was a treasure, a gold mine. Mary Treat had died without heirs, so she left all of her papers and all of her, her interesting personal effects to the Historical Society. So the more I read about Mary, the more I discovered this was a jackpot. She was such an interesting woman. She was, of course, self-educated, as women had to be in that time. They weren't allowed to go to college. So they were allowed to go to finishing school so they could learn to curtsy. And how to get into a carriage without showing your petticoats or something. So she had taught herself science, and she had the moxie to correspond with Charles Darwin. She cooperated with him on many experiments. She corresponded with Asa Gray. I had all these letters that they had in their collection. I held letters written by Charles Darwin in my hand. It was amazing. And she had a very interesting life on top of it, starting with this wackadoo husband who ran off to New York in pursuit of a glamorous suffragette who believed in free love. And I think that the idea, and he was also really crazy and overbearing, and I think Mary's response was probably, go with God. More room for my experiments here. And actually, the more I thought about it, if you were a woman in the 19th century who really had a passion for your own, who wanted to pursue your own vocation, the very best thing to be is a married woman whose husband has run off. Because no one is pestering you to get married, and no one is telling you to go get dinner. So she was in this extraordinary position. She was what was known as an unsheltered woman who made her own living as a scientist. This was exceptional. She was so interesting. Moreover, I discovered she lived in this town, Vineland, New Jersey, which was founded, for reals, was founded in 1861 as a utopian community. So this guy called Charles Landis, it was all his brainchild. He bought 30,000 acres of wilderness. He brought in the railroad. He laid out the streets, named everything big after himself. One of the first buildings that he commissioned in his utopia was a historical society. Well, the town is like 2 weeks old, and they're building a historical society. So that from the very first issue of the newspaper, which he writes and edits entirely by himself, they can deposit it in the historical society. So it's a very self-conscious experiment here, you see. He also, it was a utopian vision limited by what people could understand. We're all limited by the world we know. In Victorian times, the best shot at utopia that they could come up with is that these immigrants come in from Italy and places like that. They're farmers, and they do all the labor, including their children, who are working so hard they don't even get to go to school. And for the rich people, they have
they have a lecture series that they can go to. So this very class stratified society is the Victorian dream, of utopia. And amazingly, people bought it to an extent. It's the best thing they could. It's, as I keep saying, it's the best they knew. We live with the best we know. It's hard to think outside of the world we know. So this Charles Landis, he's not just the newspaper editor. He's the mayor. He owns many hotels. He's a real estate mogul. His leadership style is basically to make rules that put money into his pockets and those of his friends. He probably didn't pay taxes. He had this funny hair. Okay, you ready for this? He actually did shoot somebody on Main Street. You cannot make this stuff up. So this had to be the setting of my novel. So this is the backdrop. This is the backdrop of the 19th century portion of the novel. So Mary Treat is here. Charles Landis is here. And I've invented my protagonist in that among that set of characters is a man I invented called Thatcher Greenwood. He has just come to town as the new science teacher. He's excited to teach the ideas of Charles Darwin. He's really psyched about that. In the high school. It's a very big deal that they have a high school here. At the time, it was one of maybe 12 high schools in the whole country. So he's very excited until he meets with his principal and finds out, no, we're not going to be talking about Darwin here. We are transcendentalists here. Thatcher's not even going to be allowed to take his students outside to observe nature because observation could be dangerous. Science is dangerous. So, there we are. That's the pickle he's in. And he has a young bride, this Rosie, he is just married and is now getting to know because that's how it went in those days. And she's not all that interested in his work, but she's very interested in new frocks. And she's kind of a materialistic and a social climbing young lady. And so he's dealing with that. And he also lives with her mother, Aurelia, who is sort of a corseted bulwark of judgment. She's also, a social climber and sort of, so he's in a mess. And he's really worried about his job and his family, and he's just learned that the house that they've inherited that was built by Rosie's deceased father, is fundamentally flawed, that it's falling apart. So he's just kind of figured out the mess he's in, and he's lonely. He doesn't have anyone really to talk with. And until he meets his neighbor, Mary, Mrs. Treat. And so this is, I believe, the second time. And Mary, the first time he sees Mary, he looks out the window and she's lying face down in the grass. His wife Rose is kind of spying out the window, and he says, "Good heavens, is she dead?" And Rosie says, "No. Now and again she moves." Well, it turns out she's observing ants. That's just the kind of person, and she really did that. That's the kind of person she was. This also really happened. I read about this in her journals. She spent an entire morning with her finger in the trap of a Venus flytrap to see what would happen, to see if it would dissolve her finger. That had to go in the novel, right? So the first time Thatcher met Mary, that's what she was doing. So he knew he had either stumbled on a mad woman or the most interesting person he'd ever met. And they become friends. In fact, Mary, I really believe this about her, she was one of those rare people who just didn't care what people thought. And we all need a friend like that. So, this is Mrs. Treat and Thatcher. Sorry. In Mary's parlor. And they've been talking about the fact that he's not going to be allowed to teach, as he's not free to teach as he wishes. And they've discovered they share this passionate interest in the natural world. You and I are not like other people, he ventured. I will warn you that people in the 19th century spoke a little differently than they do now. They didn't always use contractions, but you'll understand them anyway. You and I are not like other people, he ventured. We perceive infinite nature as a fascination, not a threat to our sovereignty. But if that sense of unity in all of life is not already lodged in a person's psyche, I'm not certain it can ever be taught. You are a teacher of natural sciences, are you not? I am. Also an employee and head of a family. As it happens, a family in dire need of costly home repair. I have inherited a flawed house and find myself pledged to uphold it. If I should lose my home and vocation, he found it difficult to go on. Since that awful moment with Rose, the day he told her, he had resisted believing a truth he now saw plainly. Mrs. Treat waited for him to say it. If I lose my position here and fail to find means for preserving our home, I'm sorry to say my wife would probably follow. I would lose her also. I can see no happy end for myself in noble crusades. Mrs. Treat looked him directly in the eye. Mr. Greenwood, those are qualities personal to you. They have no bearing on truth. Such words. And yet she'd spoken them without a hint of chastisement, only as one scientist to another. Whatever else he might be, she expected him to be rational. Of course, he said, you observed the situation correctly. Now she leaned toward him, guileless as a girl in her confidence. We are given to live in a remarkable time. When the nuisance of old mythologies falls away from us, we may see with new eyes. Falls away, he said, or is torn. The old mythologies are a comfort to many. But we are creatures like any other, she said. Mr. Darwin's truth is inarguable. And, he said, because it is true, we will argue against it as creatures do. Our eyes are not new, nor are our teeth and claws. I am afraid I foresee a great burrowing back toward our old supremacies, Mrs. Treat. No creature is easily coerced to live without its shelter. Without shelter, she said, we stand in daylight. Without shelter, he said, we feel ourselves likely to die. So there you have it. You'll just have to read it to find out what happens. I'm sorry you can't get it here, but I do want to encourage you to get it from the library, or I know that they, at the Harvest Table restaurant, they at the store in Malibu, they have copies, and you can find this at a bookstore at Maximilian, or you can. I'm going to just tell you also. That there are alternatives to Amazon, just so you know. I mean, for writers, Amazon is not our friend. Amazon is kind of not anybody's friend. It is putting real bookstores out of business, which is not a good thing for democracy and for choice. So if you go online, you can order any book you want from an independent bookstore, such as Malaprops in Asheville. They love to hear from you. So just go online, order it, they'll send it right out to you, just saying, okay. That's the commercial part of the evening. Not for me, but for bookstores, because we need them. I wish we had one closer to us here. Okay, I'm going to open the floor to questions. And I will call on you, and I will repeat your question, so everybody can hear it. And so I'll just warn you that if you say something like, "Oh, Barbara Kingsolver, I love all your books and my favorite," I'm not going to repeat that. Okay? So I'll just say thank you in advance. So before you ask a question, ask yourself, what is the question? There it is.
I read about various, I thought about putting Darwin himself in the book. He's a really interesting person, but I decided to leave him alone. He's very much like mail. And I wanted to say, on this side of the Atlantic, I'm an American novelist. I write American novels, it seems. So I was looking at Americans who in the 19th century had championed Darwin's ideas. I started with Asa Gray, who was a very well-known botanist. He just didn't do it for me. I read a lot about him. It was like one of those dates, it was good on paper. Chemistry just wasn't there. Just swipe left. Instead, I read about some of his colleagues, and I ran across a name I had never heard before, Mary Treat. I could find out almost nothing about her online except that she was a lady naturalist, as they were called in the 19th century. She left a considerable body of writing. She wrote books and many, many articles for the scientific and popular press about botany, entomology, natural history in general. But I couldn't find anything about her personally, except that she had lived in a place called Barnwood, New Jersey. Judy called, there was a historical society there, to find out whether they had any information about Mary Treat. And the answer was sort of like, I've been waiting all my life. She said, this wonderful woman named Patricia Martinelli, who's the curator of this little historical society, said, come on down. So I got on the plane, I flew to Barnwood, New Jersey, and wow, there was a treasure, a gold mine. Mary Treat had died without heirs, so she left all of her papers and all of her, her interesting personal effects to the Historical Society. So the more I read about Mary, the more I discovered this was a jackpot. She was such an interesting woman. She was, of course, self-educated, as women had to be at that time. They weren't allowed to go to college. So they were allowed to go to finishing school so they could learn to curtsy. And how to get into a carriage without showing your petticoats or something. So she had taught herself science, and she had the moxie to correspond with Charles Darwin. She cooperated with him on many experiments. She corresponded with Asa Gray. I had all these letters that they had in the collection. I held letters written by Charles Darwin in my hand. It was amazing. And she had a really interesting life on top of it, starting with this wackadoo husband who led off to New York in pursuit of a glamorous suffragette who believed in free love. And I think that the idea, he was also really crazy and overbearing. And I think Mary's response was probably, go with God. No room for my experiments here. And actually, the more I thought about it, if you were a woman in the 19th century who really had a passion for your own, who wanted to pursue your own vocation, the very best thing to be is a married woman whose husband has run off. Seriously, because no one is pestering you to get married. I no one is telling you to go to dinner. So she was in this extraordinary position. She was what was known as an unsheltered woman who made her own living as a scientist. This was exceptional. She was so interesting. Moreover, I discovered she lived in this town, Vineland, New Jersey, which was founded, for reals, was founded in 1861 as a utopian community. So this guy called Charles Landis, it was all his brainchild. He bought 30,000 acres of wilderness. He brought in the railroad. He laid out the streets, made everything big after himself. One of the first buildings that he commissioned in his utopia was a historical society. But I mean, the town is like 2 weeks old when they're building a historical society. So that from the very first issue of the newspaper, which he writes and edits entirely by himself, then he deposited it in the historical society. So it's a very self-conscious experiment here, you see. He also, it was a utopian vision limited by what people could understand. You know, I mean, we're all limited by the world we know. In Victorian times, the best shot at utopia that they could come up with is that these immigrants come in from Italy and places like that. They're farmers and they do all the labor, including the children who are working so hard they don't even get to go to school. And for the rich people, they have a lecture series that they can go to. So this very class stratified society is the Victorian dream, of utopia. And amazingly, people bought it to an extent. It's the best thing they could. As I keep saying, it's the best thing we do. We live with the best we know. It's hard to think outside of the world we know. So this Charles Landis, he's not just the newspaper editor. He's the mayor. He owns many hotels. He's a real estate mogul. His leadership style is basically to make rules that put money into his pockets and those of his friends. He probably didn't pay taxes. Funny hair. He actually did shoot somebody on Main Street. You cannot make this stuff up. So this has to be the setting of my novel. So this is the background. This is the background of the 19th century portion of the novel. So Mary Tree is here. Charles Landis is here. And I've invented, and my protagonist among that set of characters is a man I invented called Patrick Greenwood. He has just come to town as the new science teacher. He's excited to teach the ideas of Charles Darwin. He's really psyched about that. In the high school. It's a very big deal that they have a high school here. At the time, it was one of maybe 12 high schools in the whole country. So he's very excited until he meets with his principal and finds out, no, we're not going to be talking about Darwin here. We are transcendentalists here. But that doesn't mean we're going to be allowed to take his students outside to observe nature, because observation could be dangerous. Science is dangerous. So, there we are. That's the pickle he's in. And he has a young bride. This Rosie, he has just married and is now getting to know, because that's how it went in those days. And she's not all that interested in his work, but she's very interested in new frocks. And she's kind of a materialistic and a social climbing young lady. And so he's dealing with that. And he also lives with her mother, Aurelia, who is sort of a corseted bulwark of judgment. She's also, a social climber and so he's in a mess. And he's really worried about his job and his family, and he's just learned that the house that they inherited that was built by Rosie's deceased father, is fundamentally flawed, that it's falling apart. So he's just kind of figured out the mess he's in, and he's lonely. He doesn't have anyone really to talk with. Until he meets his neighbor, Mary, Mrs. Treat. And so this is, I believe, the second time. And Mary, the first time he sees Mary, he looks out the window and she's lying face down in the grass. His wife Rose kind of spying out the window. He says, good heavens, is she dead? And Rosie says, no. Now and again she moves. Well, it turns out she's observing ants. That's just the kind of person, she really did that. That's the kind of person she was. This also really happened. I read about this in her journals. She spent an entire morning with her finger in the trap, the Venus flytrap, to see what would happen, to see if it would develop her finger. That doesn't go in the novel, right? So the first time Thatcher met Mary, that's what she was doing. So he knew he had either stumbled on a mad woman or the most interesting person he'd ever met. And they become friends. In fact, Mary, I really believe this about her, she was one of those rare people who just didn't care what people thought. And we all need a friend like that. So, this is Mrs. Treat and Thatcher. Sorry. In Mary's parlor. And they've been talking about the fact that he's not going to be allowed to teach, he's not free to teach as he wishes. And they discovered they share this passionate interest in the natural world. You and I are not like other people, he ventured. And I really knew that people in the 19th century spoke a little differently than they do now. They didn't always use contractions, but you'll understand them anyway. You and I are not like other people, he ventured. We perceive infinite nature as a fascination, not a threat to our sovereignty. But if that sense of unity in all life is not already lodged in a person's psyche, I'm not certain it can ever be taught. You are a teacher of natural sciences, are you not? I am. Also an employee and head of a family. As it happens, a family in dire need of costly home repair. I have inherited a flawed house and find myself pledged to uphold it. If I should lose my home and vocation, he found it difficult to go on. Since that awful moment with Rose, the day he told her, he had resisted believing a truth he now saw plainly. Mrs. Treat waited for him to say it. If I lose my position here and fail to find means for preserving our home, I'm sorry to say my wife would probably follow. I would lose her also. I can see no happy end for myself in noble crusades. Mrs. Treat looked him directly in the eye. Mr. Greenwood, those apologies personal to you. They have no bearing on truth. Such words. And yet she'd spoken them without a hint of chastisement, only as one scientist to another. Whatever else he might be, she expected him to be rational. Of course, he said, you observed the situation correctly. Now she leaned toward him, guided as a girl in her confidence. We are given to live in a remarkable time, when the nuisance of old mythologies falls away from us, when we see with new eyes. Falls away, he said, or is torn. The old mythologies are a comfort to many. But we are creatures like any other, she said. Mr. Darwin's truth is inarguable. And, he said, because it is true, we will argue against it as creatures do. Our eyes are not new, nor are our teeth and claws. I'm afraid I foresee a great burrowing back toward our old supremacies, Mrs. Treat. No creature is easily coerced to live without its shelter. Without shelter, she said, we stand in daylight. without shelter, he said, we feel ourselves likely to die. There you have it. You'll just have to read it to find out what happened. I'm sorry I can't put it here, but I do want to encourage you to get it from the library, or I know that at the Harvest Table restaurant, they at the store in Malibu, they have copies, and you can find this at, a bookstore at Lane, or you can, I'm going to just tell you also, but there are alternatives to Amazon. Just so you know. I mean, for writers, Amazon is not our friend. Amazon is kind of not anybody's friend. It is putting real bookstores out of business, which is not a good thing for democracy and for choice. So if you go online, you can order any book you want from an independent bookstore, such as Malaprops in Asheville. They love to hear from you. So just go online, order a book, they'll send it right out to you, just saying, okay. That's the commercial part of the evening. Not for me, but for bookstores, because we need them. I wish we had one closer to us here. Okay, I'm going to open the floor to questions, and I will call on you, and I will repeat your question, so everybody can hear it. And so I'll just warn you that if you say something like, "Oh, Brother Kingsolver, I love all your books," I'm not going to repeat that. Okay. So I'll just say thank you in advance. So before you ask a question, ask yourself, what is the question? There you go. Okay. How about it? Yes, sir.
This is not a question, but I'll say but you realize, you said that the finishing schools were what young ladies had available. You're in one right now.
Yes, I know. This is a finishing school. Many young women were, as Becca said, in this school, until they were allowed to actually go over to Emory and learn science. Questions? Curtsy? I'm having discussions of curtsy. Yes?
In these bleak times, what is saving your life today? Like, what gives you hope?
In these bleak times, what gives me hope? Well, writing about it, doing work that I feel like is helping me to understand and is helping open conversations with other people. I think what I love about literature and about reading is that it engages you in a conversation with yourself, and as a start, and then with other people. But the other thing that, that's kind of a good point to end on. I will come back to that, to sort of what the things that give us hope. But I'll tell you, for starters, that in the day-to-day, what gives me hope is knowing that I don't have a choice. Hope is it's not just a thing you have or don't have, like blue eyes or something, or some kind of talent. It's something you do. It's something you choose. And I believe that I have to choose it because to do otherwise, to give up hope, to give up on the possibility of a better world ahead than the one we have. If I gave up on that, I would be giving myself permission to quit caring, to quit engaging, to quit doing stuff every single day that will make a difference. And if I did that, I would be turning my back on everyone that's younger than me, the whole generation ahead. And that's institutionalized child abuse. I can't do that. So what I say is you choose it every day, and you often run out of it at the end of the day. And so the next morning you get up and you say,
Yes, I'm hearing discussions of curtsy. Yes?
In these bleak times, what is saving your life today? And what gives you hope?
In these bleak times, what gives me hope? Well, writing about it, doing work that I feel like is helping me to understand and is helping open conversations with other people. I think what I love about literature and about reading is that it engages you in a conversation with yourself, and as a start, and then with other people. But the other thing that, well, you know, that's kind of a good point to end on. I will come back to that, to sort of what the things that give us hope. But I'll tell you, for starters, that in the day-to-day, what gives me hope is knowing that I don't have a choice. Hope is it's not just a thing you have or don't have, like blue eyes or something, or some kind of talent. It's something you do. It's something you choose. And I believe that I have to choose it because to do otherwise, to give up hope, to give up on the possibility of a better world ahead than the one we have. If I gave up on that, I would be giving myself permission to quit caring, to quit engaging, to quit doing stuff every single day that will make a difference. And if I did that, I would be turning my back on everyone that's younger than me, the whole generation ahead. And that's institutionalized child abuse. I can't do that. So what I say is you choose it every day, and you often run out of it at the end of the day. And so the next morning you get up and you put it on with your shoes. And that's the best I can offer. I think that doing something feels better than doing nothing. You, as I said, literary fiction doesn't tell you what to think, and it doesn't tell you what to do. There are many, many other kinds of writing around us, filling our eyes and our ears every minute, that are telling us what to think and what to do. Mostly to buy something that is going to make you sexier or whatever. I mean, we're just surrounded by the imposition of words that are telling us what to do or what to think. Literature doesn't. Literature asks you. So it's nuanced, it's subtle. The way I set this novel up is an invitation for you to think about what are the constants in human behavior. What is it in us that makes us judgmental? What is it in us that makes us hold on to old ways rather than moving forward into new? There are many answers to those questions, and I think they're most satisfying if you arrive at them yourself. But one of the things I will tell you, because you mentioned intergenerational thinking and working, one of the things that I'll tell you about this novel is that it is, among other things, it's my love letter to millennials. I have 2 millennial daughters and many, many other people in my life who are in their 20s. And they are so tired of hearing from baby boomers that millennials have ruined everything. You know, I mean, not just the normal things that young people are accused of ruining, like, you know, haircuts and music, but I mean, millennials have ruined, I don't know what, avocados and mustard, you know? I mean, I think, look at the world that we are leaving them. Look at the shape it's in. Environmentally, how can anyone my age accuse millennials of ruining anything? They haven't even gotten a chance yet. So I'm so very impressed and moved and inspired all the time by young people I see who are resourceful, who maybe just graduated into the crash and know that there's not just one job that you do in your life, there are many things that you do to put together a life, and it's not just about making a living. Young people who know how to knit, how to can tomatoes. I mean, these girls who were raised by mothers who went to work and gave them Lunchables or something, and these young people are learning how to can, and how to knit and have these revolutionary, knitting brigades and stuff. How to make things, how to make the world the way you want it to be. What inspires me most is this inkling that today's problems are not going to be solved by people who formed their worldview in the, let's face it, in the 1950s and 60s. If you look at any photograph of like who's running the world, the country, the corporations, it's mostly people whose worldview was formed in the 1950s and 60s when it seemed like there would always be plenty of everything. Tomorrow's problems are not going to be solved by yesterday's people. They're going to be solved by tomorrow's people. And that gives me ever so much hope. Yes? Oh, that's my warning. We have time for a couple more questions. Yeah?
Going on the last couple of lines that you read, how do you reconcile the tension between sunshine and death?
How do you reconcile the tension between sunshine and death? I think many, many novels and songs have been written about that. I think that's, life is that process of reconciling the wonder with the misery. But specifically, the question that was asked in that conversation, and which is asked by this novel, which happens to be called Unsheltered, is to really think about, that notion of shelter. Sheltered can mean safe and sound, or sheltered can mean naive, unworldly, unprepared for what's coming. So to think about the double-edged sword of comfort and safety versus too much comfort and safety, or holding too tightly to comfort and safety. I believe another thing, this is all, actually, you started this. All of these things give me hope. To think about the times we're in, with an eye to the fact that no good change ever really comes from a place of comfort, is very encouraging to me. Change hurts. But I also think all the time about the words of Dr. Martin Luther King, who said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but progress is sure." We can't see the end of an arc, but when I think about where the world has been, when I think about the fact that when I started, when girls went to school here, what they were allowed to know and not know, they were not allowed to vote. They were not allowed to own property. They were property. They were literally property themselves. They had no rights to their children. When I started school in Kentucky in first grade, it was a segregated school. It integrated in second grade. When my mother was young, women couldn't sit on juries. There are ups and downs. There is backsliding, but in the long run, we seem to listen to our better angels, and that might be a good place to wind up, because I think we've been talking for an hour. To end with the notion of our better angels, I think that one of the things I know, that the thing that I love most and value most about reading and especially reading stories, reading fiction, is that it takes you inside the brain of another person. Think about that. When you read a novel, you put your life down on the bedside table and you go inside these other characters' minds. You know their thoughts. You see the world through their eyes, and their problems are your problems. Their children are your children, right? You completely forget yourself and you become another person. Maybe someone who's a different gender or a different color or a different culture from you, and in doing that, you're cultivating empathy for the theoretical stranger. That is the best impulse of humanity. And people, we need us more of that in this country right now. So thank you for reading. Thank you for cultivating empathy, becoming better people in the process. Thank you for having conversations and knowing that we don't all have to agree about everything in order to agree that we share kindness, that we can share community and hope for the future. Thank you for everything you do for your library, and thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you, Barbara.